Civilized Society.
Welcome to the Silverized Society. This is our series, Nietzsche Roulette, where we interpret quotes from Nietzsche, as you might have guessed. In this episode, we're going to try to keep it Halloween themed, our favorite holiday here at the Silverized Society, by seeing how Nietzsche's quotes map onto the horror of our lives. So let us begin.
With the random number generator. Generate. 440 it says. Let's look up 440. See how terrible and frightening the quote might be. From Human All Too Human, Book 1. This is dead air. Could you please fill it in?
What am I supposed to do? Juggle?
Professional, please.
Or something? Well, Nietzsche, the thing is...
we already found it. Thanks.
That's why I don't actually bother saying anything, because then you just cut me off and try to make a fool of me, but I won't be made a fool. Not again.
This is a pretty large quote. Of the nobility. That in which men and women of the nobility excel others, and which gives them an undoubted right to be rated higher, consists in two arts, evermore enhanced through inheritance, the art of commanding and the art of proud obedience. Now, wherever commanding is part of the business of the day, as in the great mercantile and industrial world, there arises something familiar to those families of the nobility, but they lack nobility and obedience, which is in the former an inheritance from the feudal ages, and will no longer grow in our present cultural climate.
Okay. I stopped listening at one point, but I think I got the gist of it.
Did you want to generate a different quote for Halloween?
No, it sounds like he's talking about the elites of his time, which is pretty horror, in my opinion. The elites are horror. Beautiful birds outside. Excuse me.
Two arts.
Sky.
Men and women. He includes women, so that's progressive. That in which men and women of the nobility excel others, and which gives them an undoubted right to be rated higher, consists in two arts. Two arts, do you hear me? Would you like to tell me what the two arts are?
I can. It's obedience and commanding people. So being able to tell people what to do, but then also being obedient in like a noble way, he said. Like it's like being obedient, but like in a proud way or something.
Let us continue. Hyphen. Now, wherever commanding is part of the business of the day, and it's the business, commanding is in the business of the day in the mercantile and the industrial world. Okay?
It is.
The business.
How do you think we get this podcast done? Me commanding.
Yeah, that's not accurate. There arises something similar to those families of the nobility, but they lack nobility and obedience, which is in the former an inheritance from the feudal ages, and will no longer grow in our present cultural climate. Okay, this is obviously beyond...
One of my horns is loose.
Beyond you. So you've already just lost you're just looking at yourself in a mirror. I see there's no gourd behind you. Okay.
No, I removed it so as not to offend your gourd sensitivities. I took issue with that gourd.
The feudal ages required obedience, of course. Did it not? Do you understand?
But from the nobility?
Okay, let's start from some basics here. Do you know what the feudal age? Do you understand feudalism?
Yeah, I kind of understand feudalism.
Well, why don't you lay it out for us all? Go ahead and give us a 2-minute talk on feudalism. Why don't you?
It was before capitalism. It was when they people had stuff or they didn't. That was it. There was... But I'm kind of right, though. You just were born a peasant, and that's it. That's it. You were just a peasant forever. Or you weren't born a peasant. You were in the priest, and then you were a priest forever. Or you were a knight, and you were a knight forever. You were, like, tied to your not social, I guess social class kind of. There was no mobility. There was no, you know what, I'm going to do this. That's what came when, what is it called, like mercantilism or merchantism, when some people were like, actually, I'm going to go try to sell this stuff over here, and they were able to kind of have this more mobility in their lives, where they were able to get outside of the roles that they were born into through commerce. They were freed through commerce, from feudalism to commerce.
That's kind of not bad. So, but the thing about, so let's get to this obedience thing again. Now, in that world you're describing, where there's a laid out chain of command, essentially, right? Because it's emanating essentially from the sovereign, the king, and then in some people's conceptions, actually it emanates from God down to the sovereign, right? And then from the sovereign, you have the warrior caste, which is the nobility of the rural areas, and then also a priest class, let's say. And then you have the peasantry at the broader base of this pyramid, right? So yes. Now, the thing that is instilled in people in this world is obedience, right? And also, a smaller amount of people, the lessons and skill of commanding people. Because if you are of the higher caste, then you can't be a fool. You have to actually understand how to command, right? So I think what he's saying is, in this previous time, people had to learn both these skills. Now, the same person, and the peasants didn't learn the commanding part, but technically you would learn both obedience and command if you were, say, a lower nobility, right? Because you would have people on top of you, like a marquis or a duke or something.
Yeah.
Perhaps you're a humble earl. No one knows. And this changes depending on where you're at in Europe. And obviously there was a feudalism system in other places too. But unless you're the top of the chain, which would be the king or God, you do both. You do command and you do obedience. And he's saying now in the modern world, no one is instilled with this, because now everything is commercial.
Oh, but Nietzsche, how I hate to disagree with Nietzsche, but I think there are some leftovers from feudal mindset. We'll call it that. It's that feudal mindset where people are all too happy to be obedient to their beloved upper classes. They trust the science. They're a patriot, whatever classification you want to put yourself into and pledge allegiance to. So obedience, I think, extends beyond feudalism into the human soul.
If you paid close attention, however, you would see he talks about the skill of obedience and the skill of command. He's not saying that obedience and command are gone, obviously not, nor would he endorse it. He's saying that people are unskilled in these virtues, right? Because let's say you sell, like you sell decorative gourds on, what's that website that's
Etsy.
for girls? Etsy. Yeah. Let's say you do that, right? Your loyalty is only to your decorative gourd
My
business.
gourds.
Right. And, this is a terrible analogy. It's not real at all. You have no skill. I'll just leave it at that of command or obedience. You have to, perhaps you learn these things in your decorative gourd business,
I don't like obedience.
Well, then he just proves a point. You have no skill in it.
But I'm not a feudal person.
Well, we're heading back that way, so.
Well, I'm going to have to be God or a sovereign then, because I refuse to learn the skill of obedience. Look, I get
There's
it.
nothing wrong with it necessarily, okay? So if
I just had enough of it. I just had enough of obedience.
I don't think you
lately.
have had enough of. I don't think anyone's had enough.
No. I just watch
people need a
everybody
little
be.
more.
You should see how obedient people in LA are. It's gross. Like, they trip over themselves to quickly shove a mask on their face, God forbid they accidentally step 1 foot into a building that has been designated a mask zone as opposed to 1 foot outside the building that is magically mask-free zone. It's such a desire to be obedient that I've seen come out of the pandemic that it truly, I don't feel disgust for much, and I don't use that word for much, but that kind of like unquestioning, it's a very sniveling kind of obedience. It's a very like cowering dog type of like, oh, what can I do to make, the higher ups happy? I really don't like it. So I see a lot of obedience, actually.
So let's imagine, maybe you can think what is worth being obedient to?
A good mission. If you were running a business, right? Like when I work with my company and I work with coworkers or I work with other people that I'm trying to accomplish a goal with, then there is a certain kind of obedience, right? Wouldn't you like me to be obedient to the time that we set for recording? And don't you get so perturbed when I am not obedient to the time that we've set for recording?
Yeah, but see, that is, you obviously don't consider the podcast time starting to be worthy of paying attention to. And here's the reality about whatever job you have. I don't care about jobs. But the reality is if someone offered you twice the amount of money to do whatever, right? There's no loyalty. You would simply give your 2 weeks notice to whatever it is. So this commercial environment has nothing to do with obedience. I'm talking about true obedience, like something that you submit yourself to because you think that it is intrinsically, I don't want to say better, but intrinsically
higher, within
the right to command.
Okay, so that's
and I think
different.
A lot of people don't think this way, and I understand why. I mean, I get it, but it is interesting if there is something useful to that, or if there is something necessary, even worse to that, then we're in the worst of both worlds because there's nothing that anyone sees as worthy of obedience to, and at the same time, they are, like you say, putting on. Are people really still wearing masks? It's October 2022. Are people still wearing masks?
You have
Just
no
a yes
idea.
or no answer. Is
yes,
it true?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Move on.
Yes. Like
Okay.
fervently, passionately loving the mask, still wearing with little devices to make sure that they're hanging around their necks at all times.
Good.
Like literally there's a what do you call, like a market that pops up randomly that sells, you know how glasses have those things so that they hang around your neck for masks, because God forbid you forget your mask when you're going to the grocery store or something. You know how many people die walking to the grocery store.
A lamp.
Lanyard is
lanyard.
for keys. Lanyard is for keys, no?
Isn't the same though? Lanyard is saying like
Who
a
cares?
string.
I don't care. They enjoy
Well,
the
I love
lanyards.
words.
Lanyards are for losers.
Okay. So, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, there is a question of imagine this world.
No.
Imagine the world, okay, for a second, and imagine this world. The potential peace that one might feel. It's probably the peace that religious people feel still. When they go into some sort of situation in which they pay due respect to something that they truly believe is higher to themselves. That's probably an emotion you've never even felt in your life.
I just...
I can't even imagine. But I mean, I'm all about anarchy and all that kind of stuff too. I'm just pushing this other idea. Maybe there is something. Okay, actually, let me put it a different way. Clearly, there's a huge swath of people that actually want to be submissive because they're still wearing masks in 2022. Or they're just deranged.
Trying to tell you is that I think that there is, maybe we need to define some words here, because when I think of obedience, I think of like that kind of thing of like, oh, who can I obey? Like who is above me that I should take command from? But you're speaking of something that sounds more like has this salvation kind of quality to it or something, that it's like there's some...
No.
I don't know.
I'm talking about genuine respect for something. Think about that. Imagine being a medieval knight or something. I know this is hard for you.
But this is not... Oh, yeah, because you're so, able to empathize with a medieval knight. I don't think...
Well, you're not at all. You
don't know that. Maybe I have experiences that are akin to a medieval knight. I don't know. I've walked alone here in LA at night. That feels a little bit medieval. So who knows? I probably would be worse than medieval.
So let's imagine that you lived in a world in which there was a hierarchy in which you actually felt that there was protection above by a just ruler.
But that's not what we have. That's
We have
why.
nothing. We just have a vacuous anarchy of the spirit. We have a bunch of people thinking that they're own sovereign, and they're not, and they're just crying in their rooms and like watching Netflix and putting masks on themselves, and it's just absurd. So I'm just asking you to try. I'm not asking you to endorse it, by the way. I don't care. Anarchy, do whatever you want. I'm trying to make people think about a different mindset, a mindset in which, right or wrong, you could at least
this is
legitimately
the military.
trust in something.
Isn't this kind of like how it is for the military? Like people that really are into the army and really like, once upon a time, I don't even know if this still exists, but like it would have been more recently, you would find this in the military. People that believe in serving their country. And, it's like this ethos of like, I submit myself. I, in a way, subjugate myself because there's a lot of restriction that comes with being in the army. Like they can't do anything. They're there and it's like they have to follow these rules and shit, and they have to like be uncomfortable and obedient to a sergeant, whoever is above them.
It's a sergeant. That's what they're all called. They're called sergeants. It's just
but there's
everyone
lieutenant and there's other names.
Okay.
Colonel.
Right. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to speak to that. I think even in your characterization of it, though, you're scoffing, kind of like you have to submit yourself to the government or something. I think that, and I'm not saying that I'm different. I'm a rebel with a cloak. I'm just saying that I'm trying to get people to think about a different mindset. I'm not suggesting
I get it. I don't
think you do. I actually don't think you're capable
Let me explain.
of getting it.
In
fact, I think that, like Nietzsche says, you lack the skill of obedience or command. And there might be something else to be said.
Let me explain it. Don't say
I will not.
it.
There might be something else to be said. No, I command the floor. There might be else to be. If one does not learn the skill of obedience, perhaps one never learns the skill of command.
I don't agree. I would like to see you found that argument, but I won't see it because I'm going to make a point, which is that I understand what you're talking about. This idea of like submitting oneself to something that one truly believes in.
Listen to your voice.
I'm trying to emphasize. I'm not being, scoffing about it.
Your tone is racked with sarcasm because you're born into a world which doesn't understand the old world. But continue.
World. What are you standing on the fucking threshold between the old world and the new world? Is that how you see yourself? You in your velvet $5.99 cloak? You're gonna tell me about the threshold between the new and the old world? Drink your coffee and silence yourself while I explain what it means to subjugate oneself to a higher power that one believes in. I think that once upon a time, the peasants really believed that rulers had divine connection. They were connected to gods, and they were in a way like somewhat divine. And so, of course, if you believed like, here is this figure who has been placed into this role because they are designed for it. They are fated to protect us and to lead us into progress and how do you say, like, thriving shit, like when the harvest thrives and all of that. I can't think of the word. Abundance.
Plenitude.
Sure. Plentitude. Abundance is better, but plentitude as well. Abundance and plentitude, and we'll thrive, and the dark forces and the heathens will all remain outside our town's confines. If you believed that this human being had that capacity, then of course you would take pleasure and you would see it as your duty to be obedient to that. And this is where you get that kind of like, herd mindset where the person that wouldn't be as obedient would be looked at as like kind of lacking, as a failure, as a threat to the rest, because they're opening this doorway for undermining this great person that's, put in this place by God to lead you to, triumph in life. Do you understand how I understand?
Do. And here's where your story shows that you're incapable of leaving the modern mindset, because you told that story in a transactional manner. In other words, it was always, if the ruler, through God's will or whatever, does positive things and gives us a good harvest, then I obey. You don't understand. Again, you don't understand. The skill of obeying is regardless of the outcome. It's because the world around you has a structure which is immutable, and you have a place in it. And it's not questioned. It's not, oh, did the prince put the fertilizer on the wheat good because God told him to? That's not it. It is a totally different mindset. It's a mindset which, I'm telling you, and I'm agreeing, I'm not joking now, I don't think I understand either. I don't. I'm fucking with you a little bit.
I get what you mean. And no, I wasn't trying to make it transactional. I understand.
I know you weren't trying to. You can't help it. Because
you're trying to be Hannibal Lecter about like understanding my psychology and being like, I understand how.
No, I just listened to what you said, and I understand it.
You listen to what I say and you misunderstand, like someone that lives on the threshold of the new and the old worlds, which is your right to do. But I tell you that you're right, though. We don't have this anymore. We don't have this understanding in our society. I think what you see is like this gross, mutated version of the desire, the instinct to subjugate oneself. I think there's a shit ton of people who are born peasants. I'm going to be real, out of pocket on this one. I think, not like genetically or whatever, but like, I don't care why. I don't know. Maybe genetically. Who fucking knows? I just think there's a bunch of people that are like beta. Like that they are born and raised and environmentally molded to be not in charge of shit and to subjugate themselves. And I catch that instinct in myself. Okay, I'm not here trying to say I'm an alpha, I'm going to fucking lead everyone. I'm not saying that. I catch that inclination in myself. It's a very middle class mindset. This kind of like, I will take my responsibilities, but I will also look around for like some higher up that's going to take command of the entire situation. This is not the person that starts the business. This is the person that manages it. There's a difference there. And I catch myself sometimes being like willing to defer to people because I feel like they have some air of authority, but really what it is that I am lacking that sense of authority in myself. And so I just naturally look to another person as an authority, which is gross. And I reject this impulse in myself, and I will scrape it from the insides of my body until it is gone, until every shred of my desire to look for authority outside myself has been divulged, purged.
And you'll fail.
I reject
because
you.
All
I
human
will
beings.
purge you.
That's not going to do any good. It's again, it's so funny because he's right. Once the mercantile and the industrial mindset comes, you can't even, you're trying to tell a story about this, and a personal story and a funny story, and you have to be like, because I'm an entrepreneur instead of a middle manager. Like, our entire minds cannot exit this framework, which is fine, and it makes sense.
What framework? The modern mindset.
Every analogy you made has to do with like business.
Fuck off.
It's exactly what he was saying. He's like once the industrial and the mercantile
world. How do you
world.
call it?
Huh?
A boss. What do they call it? Girl boss? Girl boss.
Yeah.
Girl boss.
Yeah. So,
Feudal girl boss.
Yeah, that was a rarity. I don't know what to tell you. I think has this been a horrific Nietzsche roulette?
Yeah, it has been.
I don't think so. I think it's been
feudal
great.
mindset is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the feudal mindset. It's akin to the peasant mindset, but it expands beyond just the peasantry to reach every human. Because even the king believed that he was tied to his role. He just was in the better role, so good for him. But everybody else, the knights, the priests, whatever, whether they were peasant or not, they still had this feudal mindset, which is you are your role. That is so different from the modern mindset where we're always changing roles, and you can decide tomorrow to take this new place in society, and you're not tethered to your social class, to any real role. I mean, we are in, obvious ways, but not in the feudal way that it's like there's no way to even conceive of what an identity or an existence was outside of peasantry, knighthood. You were your role. There was, and this is why the idea of the individual didn't really exist during feudal times. I believe this came later, around the Calvinists and other. This is a little bit the beginning of individualism, because they started to say, oh, you don't need the church per se to tell you the word of God. Like, you can divine what God wants yourself, which is giving you quite a bit of power then, because now you in communion with God. And this was very sacrilegious idea that I think religious people don't even think about. They don't think about what it means to have an individual connection to God. You didn't have that at one point. It was just like God exists, then there's the mediators between God and you. Am I wrong?
No, you're kind of right. I think you're really going into some maybe Luther misinformation. Yeah, of course, the Protestant Reformation occurred, and then one of the key points of it was you have the right to individually interpret the Word of God. Why are we under religious stuff again? Also because it was translated into the vernacular languages, but I think people did understand the idea of individuality to the point, in a religious sense, of like you have an individual soul, I would think. So I mean, I don't think it was that.
I don't know.
Now, there is a theory. There is a theory that in the ancient world, that called the bicameral, something of the bicameral mind, that people didn't until around like the Greeks, early Greeks, people were basically schizophrenic, low-level schizophrenic. Like, their minds weren't bifurcated, and because of that, they weren't capable of having a real individual sense. And so the gods were actually manifest and present about them, because of course they were, because there's no... It kind of plays into the idea also of like pantheism and like that everything is alive, and that you're a part of it.
What?
Again, exploring the horror, or not necessarily horror, of ancient mindsets. Here on the Civil Rights Society podcast. That's
not real though, right? Like the bicameral mind or whatever you're saying, that was a theory that people had, or like
it's a guy wrote a book in the 70s about it, and we were discussing it briefly on a different episode a long time ago. So I think that he also says this is why Socrates has this idea of the daemon, like the daemon is a voice inside his head that tells him not what to do but what not to do, or something like that, or it always answers in the negative, I think.
Yeah, well, that's what Socrates said, yeah.
His theory is like people heard voices, like they heard the voice, like it's not a metaphor. They heard the voice of God. They heard the voice of spirits. They heard the voice of demons, because their mind actually their physical brain hadn't quite changed. Maybe, I haven't read the book, so I don't want to mischaracterize.
I don't like that theory. I think that that's a misattribution of people's attempts in the past world to make sense of the inner voice. Because I mean, imagine being a human being with consciousness and having no fucking idea what it is, and you have thoughts. Well, imagine what was it like to have thoughts for like the first time? Imagine a human being having thoughts and being like, what the fuck? Whose voice is that? Is that me? Why am I thinking this? And the funny thing is, you think this sounds crazy. You think, oh, that's dumb. Why would anybody think that? You're wrong, because CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, the whole point of it is to create a distancing between you and your thoughts, so that you have a thought that it's like, oh, wow, I'm such a loser, or I got up late today. And you distance yourself to say, that voice is not me. That's just a thought. It doesn't have to mean anything. I can let it go, just as I can pick another thought. And so it's this distancing between the self and one's thoughts, which sounds like this same explanation of, oh, Socrates called it a daemon, and other, likened it to having the voices of the gods. Maybe that was just their way of doing CBT. How about that? Okay, bicameral mind guy. I don't like the theory. I think it makes fun of it makes light of people's attempts to deal with their inner world. I don't think it was just a bunch of people being schizophrenic.
Yeah, and I may be misrepresenting the argument in that book. I just know of it. I've heard of it. But I mean, it's funny because you even kind of are like saying it's true. Because if, not true physically for the brain, but like you're saying cognitive behavioral therapy tells you to differentiate between yourself, in quotes, and your thoughts. Mm-hmm. Well, why would you draw that distinction unless there is a fundamental difference? That's weird.
Yeah. Well,
it is all you, apparently, right? Because if it's not, then your thoughts kind of sounds like something demonic that's entered your mind that you can somehow use a mental scalpel to excise and move away.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what you have to do. I think it works. That's why CBT is a pretty effective thing. And so that's why Socrates was also right to be like, this is a daemon that I listen to or deal with in that way, as opposed to just fusing with the thoughts. But Socrates' thing is a little different. I don't want to totally liken it, because there's also this like the daemon can be a little bit characterized as intuition also, not just thoughts, because the daemon was never wrong, was his argument. Daemon, this is why this idea that his daemon never said anything positive. It was just like, don't do that. And that it was always right and he always obeyed it. So that's not actually thoughts. But that's enough thoughts. How about some subscriptions? How about some likes? How about some comments? Why don't you externalize those thoughts and leave them as comments? What a strange noise going on. No one's going to hear it. It's my daemon speaking. And my daemon says that you should subscribe to the Silver Eye Society on YouTube, on Patreon, etc. And have you anything to say, Justin? Do you want to share your feudal mindset one more time? I'm like in the dark
No,
here.
I don't. I feel like I've said exactly what I needed to say.
Excellent. Good. Like a good peasantry. Knowing your role. And our listeners' role is to see us on the next episode. Bye.
By the way, being late for the podcast means that your video footage publicly shames you, because I can tell that the light is actually leaving your video footage. And so there is a ramification beyond the communal desire to set rules and time frames and that kind of stuff. Nature itself condemns you for your tardiness, as you can see. And happy Halloween.
Yes, nature does condemn me. Bye.